Scream is entering film 7. And what a wild ride we've been on, I think that's safe to say. However, it's now a ride I wish to abort. I would like to get off of this ride. I don't want to ride it anymore. How many more times can I say ride? I'll say it a few more times. Don't want to ride it anymore. Don't like it. From firing the lead of the last few movies to then also still ramming the movies with endless callbacks to the original film down our throat, the franchise has kind of lost its groove and I feel it's become directionless. And to quote Sidney Prescott, don't with the original. And unfortunately, they won't stop doing that. While it worked for a while, I don't think it's working anymore. So this is my hot take on why I think the Scream franchise just needs to end. I will preface though and say Scream and Scream 4, I believe, are perfect movies. Really, truly great films. Sadly, it's gone downhill and I hate to see the demise of a franchise that was thriving for a while. It's falling apart, unfortunately. And it's very disappointing. The original was, of course, released in 1996, and it was directed by Wes Craven, a horror master. It starred Neve Campbell, Courtney Cox, Rose McGowan, Matthew Lillard, etc., etc. It, of course, followed Sidney Prescott, played by Neve Campbell, who is targeted by a masked assailant known as Ghostface, who seems to be targeting her and her friends. We're not really sure why, but we know he is relentless and he is ruthless and he will go after anyone. As we see at the beginning of the movie, when Drew Barrymore, who is on the cover of the poster, she was kind of a red herring. She was supposed to be the lead in our eyes. That's what we thought. She was the big name. This was the first of its kind that put the big star on the cover and killed them off within the first 10 minutes of the movie. It was a smart way to play it, but sadly, the franchise is no longer smart. Anyway, the film, like I said, follows Sidney Prescott, her friends, and one by one they're picked off. Rose McGowan, of course, dies in her garage door. And we do find out that Stu and Sidney's boyfriend Billy are the assailants committing the heinous acts. Why? Because Sidney's mother was having an affair with Billy's father. I believe that's how it all goes down. Scream is a great movie, great twists. You never really know who you can trust. I think we know from the beginning Billy is a bit sus. I don't trust him, but Stu was a real curveball in the mix. He's the comedic value, and it was quite shocking when he turned out to be one of the killers too. The film is meta, as is the entire franchise. It's self-referential and it pays homage to just horror movies. It plays out like it states in the film. There is one character who's a movie buff who just references horror movies. Don't say this, don't do that. If you do this, it means you're gonna die. We need a final girl. It's great. If you love movies, you love horror movies, Scream is a perfect movie for a horror movie fan. However, it doesn't end there. Of course, why would it? In future movies, Sidney continues to be the target of each iteration of Ghostface, with them all having their own motivations. In Scream 2 and Scream 4, the motivation is due to her fame from the original spree of attacks. She becomes infamous. Woodsboro is a small town, so of course, she just becomes known as the final girl of the Woodsboro attacks. And she is notorious around town. I can't really remember Scream 2 and Scream 3 that well, so I'm not going to really reference them. I've definitely seen them both once, maybe, but I couldn't even tell you what happens in either of them. So we're just going to jump over those two and get into Scream 4, because this is where things start to turn. There was an 11-year gap between the original trilogy and Scream 4. People were nervous, of course, but mostly excited of the return of a beloved franchise. I personally was very excited. I remember being at Fan Expo Canada when Neve Campbell announced that they were going to do a movie. Well, she said she would sign on if certain people were going to do the film. And then, of course, she did. Scream 4 was the first time, in my opinion, that a sequel came out and beat out the original, or at least was on par with the original movie. They didn't necessarily try anything new, that's for sure. If you've seen it, you'll know. It follows a very similar formula. There are attacks. We don't know who the killer is. The whole movie, we're trying to find out who the killer is. Sidney is getting targeted. That's what we know. Sidney, her family, and her family's friends. The payoff was absolutely worth it, even though it wasn't anything new. It gave you that same nostalgic feeling Scream 1 did, and it was great. Sidney returns to town along with characters like Gail Weathers popping up. She's a journalist writing books about the Woodsboro attacks. The twist of this one, though, is that the new Ghostface is Sidney's family. Well, specifically one family member, her cousin Jill, played by Emma Roberts. This was an epic twist. I did not see it coming, and the best part, again, like I said earlier, the motivation was the fame. Jill was envious of Sidney. She was envious that she was so famous and popular around town. She wanted that fame. She wanted to be the famous final girl, and she wanted to take Sidney's place. So to do that, she had to take down her own family. Of course, she was unsuccessful. We had a great ending. Many found it cringy. I found it chill-worthy when they're all in the hospital. Sidney's been attacked, of course. Jill was attacked and Gail was attacked, and they're all in the hospital recovering. And this is when we find out it was Jill. Well, we already knew it was Jill. We found out in the house. But Jill is there in the hospital. She comes into Sidney's room. She tries to attack her. Gail and Sidney team up together. And Sidney says to Jill, rule number 1, don't f*** the original. And then Jill says to Sidney, any final words? And Sidney says, clear. Jill's like, clear? And then behind her is Gail with those paddles. What are they called? The ones that go on your heart to bring you back to life. Can't remember. But she puts it around her head and she goes, clear. Sparks fly. It's amazing. It's an epic ending to a great movie. This film was so fun, and it was very self-referential, but it worked because it was an 11-year gap between the original trilogy. We wanted those callbacks. We wanted to feel that original trilogy again. We loved that the characters returned. We loved seeing them older. It was so nostalgic, and it was perfect. I honestly think Scream 4 was a good place to maybe stop, but then we got Scream 5. We got a whole new crop of characters. It's fine, because they were great. It was a great group of new characters. Scream 5 introduced Sam, played by Melissa Barrera, and her sister, who was played by Jenna Ortega. I can't remember what her name is. Tara? Sam, we find out, is the daughter of Billy Loomis. Obviously, the original... Billy Loomis? Is that his last name? She's the daughter of Billy, the original Ghostface. So you can see how this is all going to link together, right? Sidney once again returns. I don't know why. If I was Sidney, I would never return to this town again. Every time you return, people try to attack you. And there is a new masked assailant after they begin to target the relatives of Billy, that being Sam and Tara, whatever her name is, Jenna Ortega. Gail, of course, is there. She always is. She never leaves. But they all work together. They bring down the assailant, who is Sam's boyfriend and is living in the former home of Scream 1's villain Stu. So many callbacks. At this point, we're questioning how long the franchise can continue this act. Introducing a new Ghostface, bringing back the original cast, and just doing endless callbacks, and somehow always having to incorporate Sidney in order to make the story flow. Because that is ultimately what this franchise relies on. It relies on Sidney Prescott. She is the reason any of this is happening. Well, her mother. But it all starts with Sidney. You remove Sidney, you remove the backbone of the franchise. And that is what happens with Scream 6. Because now we're just following these new characters, Melissa Barrera and Jenna Ortega and their family. Obviously, what we have going there is they're related to Billy. Sam's related to Billy. So they're trying everything to keep that narrative alive. The original. Like I said, Scream 6, Sidney doesn't appear, but the film takes place in New York City. Ghostface returns once again, of course, he has to. This time we're dealing with copycats. And we have Ghostface revealed early on to the point where we're like, okay, they're trying something new. This is great. We're seeing Ghostface right from the get-go. We know who it is. However, we're wrong. What we know is that it's almost like a legion of Ghostfaces. They're all teaming up. It's a cult. They worship the idea of Ghostface, and they're trying to continue on the legacy. Gail is targeted, she's attacked with a fate left unknown, but what we do know is she tells Sam and Tara to tell Sidney that Ghostface never got her. Wonder why. We do know though that the Ghostface in Scream 6, it's the family of Sam's boyfriend. There's so many webs being woven, it's starting to get overly complex, but the downside is we're not caring anymore. We cared when it was Sidney. We cared when it was Gail. We cared about the original cast, and we cared about the original story. It made sense to us. But now there's too many different webs. I don't care about Billy's family. I don't care about that narrative. And it really is trying to play so much into Sam being Ghostface. I know that sounds weird if you've not seen it, but obviously Sam being Billy's daughter, she is haunted throughout Scream 6 by the ghost of Billy. There is a part towards the end where they go into almost a Ghostface museum, where it's all these items from the original movies and the original trilogy, even Scream 4. Callbacks, once again, items the Ghostface killer used. And we get to see the original Scream outfit, and it's in a casing, and Sam looks in it, and we see the ghost of Billy, and he's talking to her. And we know it's trying to play into, okay, he's getting in her head. She is going to turn to the dark side and continue what he started. It's stupid. Unfortunately, it's just stupid. That's what annoys me now. This is such a beloved franchise with such a strong through line in each movie until 5 and 6. 5 even made sense. 5 did make sense. Sidney was there. She came back. She helped these new characters. And obviously, being Billy's ex-boyfriend, who was originally the target of his crimes, helping his family is crazy. It made sense. But now we're just following this one narrative that we didn't even care for. The worst part is they have announced Scream 7, and they've fired Melissa Barrera. She is, of course, the lead of these new movies, and they fired her because she was outspoken about certain events going on in the world. It doesn't take much to put 2 and 2 together. So that already makes me nervous. And of course now Jenna Ortega is saying she won't return. She's saying it's a scheduling conflict with Wednesday. I don't necessarily believe that. I do believe, and I'm grateful for her for not returning. I think it's to do with other things, specifically the Melissa Barrera stuff. But they have since announced that Neve Campbell would return as Sidney Prescott. And it's at what point can you keep doing this that it would remain believable to us that Sidney would continue to return to this town? Sidney, who's a mother and a wife, who's going to keep coming back to Woodsboro to solve these crimes. When we know she goes through hell every time she comes back. She can't trust anyone. And it's sad. It feels like the franchise is dying in front of our eyes, and they need to just stop. They just need to call it quits. I'd rather they just never made another one. You don't need to tie it all together, because how are you going to tie Scream 7 all together? A lot of the original cast are killed off. Gail, at the end, her fate is unknown. I can only assume she is alive, and I assume Courtney Cox would return if Neve Campbell's coming back. Also, the whole thing, Neve Campbell wasn't going to originally return. She didn't in 6 because they wouldn't pay her what she wanted. And now with everything going on, I'm sure they hiked that price up. So it's disappointing. I don't want Scream 7 to just backtrack and try to repair the mistakes they've made and throw more callbacks in our face. You know, it's already so meta and self-referential. There's only so much you can do with that. And I think, unfortunately, it is at that point where they need to just call it quits. Whether you agree with me or not, I know Scream is fun. Scream 6 was fun. I did have a good time watching it. I just thought this is arguably the worst they've done. And it's hard to say that because I did enjoy Scream 5. I thought this is a pretty good movie. Scream 4 was incredible. And it didn't, like I said, it didn't really try anything new, but it made sense what they were doing, and it was a great twist. Unfortunately, with these newer movies, there's no payoff with what they're giving us. Scream 6, the killers being the family of Sam's ex-boyfriend, who was the previous Ghostface, didn't make sense to me. They introduced Dermot Mulroney. Yes, he's great. I love him. He's a great actor. I just did not care. I didn't care that it was this now family of ghost faces coming after everyone. I just feel it's becoming silly. Yes, I know it was already so meta and that can lean on silly quite a bit, but now it's becoming stupid. As an audience, we don't need to be treated as stupid, and we don't need to be given work that's not high caliber like the rest of the franchise is. It's so good, and now it's gone to shit, fortunately. So that's where my head's at. Where's your head at? I think realistically they should stop now. I know they're going to do 7. At 7, yeah, tie it all together in a pretty little bow and end it. But I think it's a little too late for my liking, and it really has left a sour taste in my mouth. Leave me a comment below if you liked Scream 6, Scream 5, or what your favorite Scream is, and let me know if you agree that this franchise just needs to end. Because honestly, Wes Craven's legacy, I don't want it to see it play out like this. It's unfortunate. And I can't even remember who the director is that's doing 7. I assume it's who did 6, but we shall see. Anyway, I will see you in the next video.